Slam. Spotlight hits. A beat-up Bronco forced off the road. That kind of truck, driving through $1 million neighborhood? Black guy, driving slow. Something's off. They ripped open the trunk, yanked the door wide. No warrant, no warning, no reason. Just one thing. He didn't look like he belonged. But the man they just humiliated was the newly appointed chief of police. What state are you watching from? Could this happen where you live? Welcome to Mr. 7 Stories. If you believe justice should speak loud, hit like, subscribe, and follow for more stories like this. Now, let's dive into today's full story. Because this time, he didn't come back to forgive. Some wounds don't bleed. They hide beneath the crisp fabric of discipline, beneath pressed uniforms and eyes others mistake for calm. But for Wesley Trenton, age 52, those wounds never healed. Back when he wore the navy blues, Wesley was a model officer. Serious, measured, never once backing down in the face of danger. 18 years on the force, no complaints, no blemishes. At the Harbor Glen Police Division, they called him the man who kept the line straight. It meant that even when he walked into the toughest neighborhoods, his conscience never strayed. But it was that same belief in honor that shattered him. Not because of bullets, not because of criminals, but because of the rot within the very institution he once trusted. Wesley never forgot the day Danica joined the force. His little sister, just 23, fresh out of the academy, sharp, brilliant, eyes full of promise. "If you could do it, I can too," Danica had said, her hand resting gently on his badge. Wesley smiled that day, but the smile didn't last. Danica wasn't welcomed the way he had hoped. They ignored her in meetings, gave her low-level tasks, laughed when she suggested ways to improve protocols. Behind her back, they called her the sensitive girl. Someone even hung a photo of her in the break room with the words, "Diversity Cop." Wesley tried to fight for her. He met with their superiors, asked them to review task assignments and evaluation criteria. But all he got was a tired shrug and the same old line. "We're not looking to stir the team over one personal complaint." Danica broke after 2 years. She left the force quietly. No farewell party. No words of thanks. Just a photo left on her desk of the two of them on her graduation day, holding up their badges, eyes shining with hope. Wesley still keeps that photo in his wallet. He resigned a year after Danica walked away. No press conference. No final words. Just walked out of the Harbor Glen Police Division gates on the same feet that had carried him through countless cases. Only now, every step weighed down by disappointment. He moved to Hawthorne Ridge, a quiet suburb nearly 15 miles from downtown. The 1988 Bronco he jokingly called Old Midnight became his only companion. He spent his days gardening, fixing up the truck, and sometimes taking Danica on drives around the lake. To outsiders, he looked like an ordinary man living a quiet life. But inside, Wesley never stopped wrestling with himself. I should have done more. I should have never left. The questions echoed in his mind, like a second hand stuck on an unfinished moment. What he didn't know was this. The old gate he once walked through was about to open again. Not for him to leave, but for him to return, with a brand new title. Mornings in Hawthorne Ridge often began in silence. The sprinklers is mixed with the scent of coffee from the tiny kitchen, where Wesley Trenton still rose before dawn. 5 years had passed since he left the police force. 5 years surrounded by oak trees, far from everything that once broke him. But that morning, it wasn't the rumble of a delivery truck or a squirrel tapping on the porch roof that broke Wesley's quiet routine. It was a phone call from the mayor's office of Harbor Glen. "Mr. Trenton." The assistant's voice came through the speaker, polite but urgent. "The mayor would like to speak with you privately. A special appointment." Wesley sat still for nearly a full minute, not because he didn't understand, but because he understood all too well. There could only be one reason they were calling him. Not after all these years. Not after everything that had been done. A few days later, Wesley stood on the front steps of Harbor Glen City Hall. The red brick building looked just as it had in his memory, but the eyes turned toward him no longer saw a mid-level officer. They saw a leader. The mayor shook his hand, eyes solemn, Wesley, we need you. No one knows this department like you do, and no one ever dared walk away from it the way you did. Wesley said nothing, but his heart beat loud. For years, he had buried every dream of reform. He once told himself, what can one man really change? But now, the very system that pushed him out was asking him to take the helm. I won't take the job, Wesley said, just to have my name on the door. I'm not interested in being a police chief in title only. The mayor smiled. We're not asking for a name. We're asking for someone with the courage to speak the truth. And so Wesley said yes. That afternoon, he drove Old Midnight, his battered '88 Bronco, back home, carrying a heart that felt both lighter and heavier all at once. Danica was on the porch, reading like always, when he told her. She was quiet for a long time, then said softly, I always believed you'd go back someday, but not because they asked, because you never really left. Wesley looked out toward the empty road ahead. A late breeze rustled the maple leaves. He knew this return was unlike any case he'd ever taken. It wasn't a robbery. It wasn't a suspect. It was a system, a sickness that had taken root deep inside. And this time, he wasn't here to calm it down. He was here to heal it, or cut out the rot, if that's what it took. While Wesley Trenton prepared to return to the force to rebuild it from within, on the other side of Harbor Glen, two names were quietly planting seeds of unrest. Shane Kershaw and Cody Lannister. Shane, 40, tall and broad, with a buzz-cut and glacial eyes, was the kind of man people instinctively avoided when passing on the street. 10 years on the Harbor Glen Police Division, and not one promotion, not because he wasn't capable, but because he didn't care. Kershaw didn't need a private desk, didn't want medals. What he craved was control. What thrilled him most, watching a grown man stammer through an apology just for parking the wrong way, seeing a black woman tremble while pulling out her wallet, even before he said a word, tapping on a car window just to check ID, then smirking when the driver inside shook so hard they couldn't unlock the glove box. Cody Lannister, 29, was an unfinished version of Shane, but no less dangerous. With his tousled brown hair, camera-ready face, and that friendly cop smile, he came across as trustworthy to the public. But anyone who worked near him knew the truth. Cody was just a younger replica of Shane, a wolf in training, still wearing the sheep's clothing. He idolized Shane so much he mimicked everything, even the way Shane twisted his wrist while snapping on handcuffs, and the smug squint when asking, "Got anything in the trunk I should know about?" Cody didn't just copy skills. He learned contempt. Together, they were a well-oiled pair. In their patrol car, they played a little game called Spot the Misfit. Whoever spotted someone who didn't look like they belonged got to hit the lights. No reason needed. No proof required. Just their gut instinct, which, conveniently, they believed was never wrong. And somehow, the misfits always turn out to be black men driving old cars, Asian women walking alone, Latino teens with backpacks. Some people had dared to file complaints, but they all vanished into silence. Shane had a cousin in internal affairs. Cody, the nephew of a former state senator. Connections strong enough to make any negative report get reevaluated before it ever reached someone with real authority. They knew they were protected, and they used that protection like a weapon. At the Harbor Glen Police Division, nobody liked Shane and Cody, but no one dared cross them, either. Then came a quiet Friday night. The entire city was glued to the Harbor Glen Braves game against Roanoke. Meanwhile, two officers rolled out in their cruiser again. They cranked up the stereo, some old country tune, and laughed as they turned onto North Ridge Parkway. What they didn't know was that in just a few hours, their little game of misfits would lead them to someone they never should have touched. That night, on North Ridge Parkway, the streetlights cast blurry shadows across the rain-slick asphalt. Late autumn winds rustled the brittle maple leaves. A familiar hush in Harbor Glen's outer neighborhoods. Inside Patrol Car 0787, Shane Kershaw yawned, tugging at the collar of his uniform. Cody, cracking open his third soda, muttered casually, "I swear, one more boring night like this and I'll cuff a deer." Shane snorted. "Forget the deer. Grab a person. Less paperwork." They both laughed. And then, like fate flipping a switch, a vehicle emerged in the opposite lane. A matte black 1988 Bronco. Its paint chipped and faded like time had clawed at its body. The vehicle moved slow and steady, as if the driver wasn't in a rush, wasn't trying to prove anything, which, to Shane, was suspicious. "You see that?" Shane asked, eyes lighting up like he'd just found prey. Cody squinted. "That truck? Looks like it rolled out of a junkyard. With that vibe, but it's got no insurance or a busted brake light." Shane snapped his fingers. "Or maybe the guy behind the wheel doesn't belong here." They flipped the car around. Red and blue lights flashed. Without a second thought, they forced the Bronco to the shoulder, right up against a roadside barrier near the woods. The driver pulled over calmly. No rush, then stepped out. He was tall, steady, wearing a dirt-colored canvas jacket and a simple black knit beanie. His eyes, though unreadable, made Cody pause for a second when they met his. "Excuse me, sir," Shane said, his voice halfway between smug and confrontational. "What brings you to this neighborhood?" The man didn't answer right away. He just glanced at both officers, then replied in a steady, even tone. "I'm driving. Is that a problem?" Cody stepped in, scanning the side of the vehicle. "This truck kind of stands out, don't you think? This is a quiet neighborhood. Your rides, giving off a different kind of energy." Shane cut in, smirking. The man simply smiled. A strange kind of smile, like he'd seen this exact scene more times than Shane and Cody had ever pulled a vehicle over. Then Shane's tone shifted. "Harder now. We're going to need to see your ID." And popped the trunk. Before the man could even respond, Cody moved the back door and yanked it open. No permission. No legal cause. Just because he thought he could. Inside were a few leather briefcases, a gym bag, and, surprisingly, a stack of documents stamped confidential, bearing the faded seal of the SBC, State Bureau of Civil Ethics. Shane's brow furrowed. "You work for the government?" Still composed, the man replied, "I was just assigned a new position. A special one." Shane scoffed. "In that junk heap? Please." Then Cody unzipped a side compartment in one of the leather cases and froze. Inside was a badge, not yet issued but unmistakable, the badge of the incoming chief of police. But before Cody could say a word, Shane slapped the side of the Bronco and mocked. "Looks more like a wannabe spy than anyone on official duty." The man, none other than Wesley Trenton, stood silent, then turned to look Shane directly in the eye. A slow, sharp gaze. "You'll know who I am. Very soon." No yelling, no threats, but the air grew thick, like a storm had just been promised. Wesley didn't need to raise his voice, because sometimes silence is the warning before the thunder. The next morning, Harbor Glen Police Division felt different, more crowded, stronger coffee, quieter murmurs. Eyes flicked toward the wall clock, as if it could reveal what was coming next, because today was no ordinary day. Today, the new chief of police was making his official debut. At dawn, a brief announcement was sent out. "All personnel, report to the main hall by 9 a.m. Be on time." Shane Kershaw and Cody Lannister showed up 5 minutes late. They slipped through the crowd, coffee cups in hand, wearing their usual masks of indifference. Last night's run-in with the black man driving the Bronco still lingered in Cody's mind. But Shane had tossed out the moment they left Northridge Parkway. "Seriously, probably some ex-CIA driver for old-timers," Shane muttered, smirking. Cody gave a soft laugh, but his eyes scanned the room uneasy. 901. The large doors at the far end of the hall swung open, and in walked Wesley Trenton. Pressed new uniform, polished badge gleaming on his chest, cap in hand, back straight like a country mile marker. The air in the room seemed to vanish. Cody froze. Shane squinted. Their eyes locked onto the man whose car they'd searched illegally less than 12 hours ago. And in that moment, it felt like a spotlight had stripped him bare. Wesley stepped up to the podium, unhurried. He set his cap gently on the table beside the mic, then looked out across the crowd, his gaze passing over every face, pausing briefly at the far left corner, where Shane and Cody stood. No nod, no signal, but they knew he'd seen them. "Good morning," Wesley began, his voice deep, steady. It echoed clearly through the pin-drop silence. "My name is Wesley Trenton, and as of today, I officially assume the role of Chief of Police for the city of Harbor Glen." Scattered claps followed, then silence again. "I'm not here to preserve the old ways. I'm here to fix what's broken." He stepped closer to the microphone. His voice wasn't loud, but every word hit like a hammer on cracked wood. "I know, in recent years, this department has crossed lines of ethics and lines of law. I know, because I was here. I saw it, and I've carried the weight of not being able to stop it." Cody swallowed hard. Shane's hand clenched his coffee so tight. The plastic lid cracked with a faint pop. Wesley continued. "Starting today, no one is beyond accountability. Whether you've served for decades or just joined last week, no matter the name on your badge, I give you my word. There will be no safe haven for those who treat the badge as a symbol of power instead of a symbol of duty." His eyes swept the room again, this time holding longer at the corner. He didn't call names, didn't point fingers. He didn't have to. His presence alone peeled back the veneer, left two men feeling exposed down to the bone. "I'm not here for revenge," he said quietly, his gaze cooling, "but I am here for change." Silence fell, not the silence of fear, but of realization. The era of cover-ups was over, and the two men who knew it best were the ones who had just made a mistake too big to undo. That morning dragged on like thunderclouds before a storm. After Wesley Trenton's searing speech, the air inside Harbor Glen Police Division felt drained of life. The usual jokes and chatter in the break room were gone, replaced by caution and quiet, darting glances. On the second floor, at the end of a dim hallway, Shane Kershaw and Cody Lannister stood leaning against the wall, hands in their pockets, eyes glued to their phones, but not reading anything. They were just trying to mask the unease cracking beneath them, like thin ice giving way. Neither said what both were thinking. That was him, the man we stopped, the man we insulted, the man whose car we tore apart. Just before noon, both phones buzzed at once. A short message from admin. "Roberts and Miller, report to the chief's office at 11 o'clock. Do not be late." Shane looked at the screen, then at Cody. No words, but their eyes said everything. 11 a.m. The office door shut behind them with a soft click. No greeting, no welcome, just silence, the kind that echoes in a dark, powered-down engine room. Wesley Trenton sat behind the desk, hands clasped, nameplate gleaming. Chief Trenton. On the desk, a gray file folder. Neat, cold. He didn't look up right away. He opened the folder, pulled out 2 printed photos from dashcam footage, laid them in front of the 2 officers. Wordless, Shane forcing the Bronco to the curb, Cody opening the back door, rifling through belongings without cause. No debate, no defense. Wesley looked up. His voice wasn't loud, but it sliced like a blade. "Tell me exactly what happened on North Ridge Parkway last night." Shane tried to stay composed. "Sir, we were on routine patrol. That vehicle looked suspicious. Old model, driving slow through a high-end neighborhood." "So you pulled it over," Wesley cut in. No clear reason. No violation. Nothing. Cody jumped in, voice softer. "We didn't know who you were, sir. If we had, we wouldn't have." Wesley leaned back in his chair. His gaze sharpened. "And if I wasn't the new chief, what then? Were you planning to cuff me? Drag me in for not fitting the look of someone who belongs?" Shane lowered his head, his hands clenched tight. Wesley continued. "This isn't about who I am. It's about how you treated someone. A citizen. Someone who didn't resist, didn't break the law, did nothing wrong, except drive an unimpressive car and with the wrong shade of skin. Cody stammered. We didn't mean any harm. Wesley's hand came down lightly on the desk. Not loud, but it made both men flinch. It's not about intent. It's about abuse, about bias, about the shame I watched my own sister endure, while wearing the same uniform as you two. He stared at them, not with anger, but with something heavier, something deeper, grief. And you reminded me, he said softly, why I came back. Thank you for that. The room fell still, not the kind of stillness that waits, the kind that judges, the kind that always comes before the reckoning. Wesley Trenton rose from his chair. Slowly, he stepped around the desk. In his hands were 2 sealed envelopes, one white, one dark yellow. Shane Kershaw and Cody Lannister stood frozen in place, like statues carved from stone. Wesley looked at them both, and in that brief moment, a thought passed through his mind. I used to think forgiveness was weakness, but now I understand justice isn't about revenge. It's about keeping what's right from losing its way. I won't let emotion drive my decisions, Wesley said, his voice calm, like still water in a glass. But I also won't let you walk away without consequence. He laid the 2 envelopes on the desk. These are your suspension notices, effective immediately. Turn in your badges and weapons, and leave the building. Shane's fist clenched. His eyes reddened, not with guilt, but with bruised pride. Cody looked dazed. He opened his mouth, about to protest, but Wesley raised a hand to stop him. I'm not finished. The report of your conduct has already been forwarded to the State Bureau of Civil Ethics for independent review, and I'll personally submit the full record, including the dashcam footage, witness statements, and, he paused, a clip from internal surveillance. Shane's eyes narrowed. Surveillance? What surveillance? Wesley gave a faint smile and nodded toward the ceiling. A tiny round camera blinked above the office door. In this department, no one is untouchable, not even me. A flicker of confusion crossed Shane's face. Cody went pale. Then, just as the silence stretched taut, a knock came at the door. Wesley raised an eyebrow. Come in. The door opened. A woman stepped in, plain clothes, hair pulled back. In her hand, a printed call log, a report from the night before, an anonymous tip. 2 officers pulled over a civilian vehicle without cause. Shane glanced sideways at Cody. Cody looked away. Wesley took the paper, skimmed it, then looked up. Most people don't know what you do on quiet night shifts, but the public knows. And now, they've spoken. He motioned for the woman to leave, then turned back to the 2 men. From this moment forward, you no longer have access to any internal systems. Your ID cards will be rejected by security. I don't need further justification for a breach of public trust. Shane silently removed his badge, placed it on the desk, a simple motion. But for a man like him, it was public humiliation. Cody still gripped his Glock, hesitating. Wesley looked him in the eye. You can hold on to that, but it's just cold metal now. What you really lost was trust, and that's something you'll never wear on your chest again. At last, Cody set the gun on the desk. His hands trembled. Neither of them said a word. They walked out of the office like men who had survived a storm. But the real storm was still waiting. Hours later, in the main hall of the precinct, the entire force had been summoned. No one knew exactly what was coming. Boot steps echoed across the tile floor, sharp and steady, as if everyone sensed this wasn't just another shift. It was a reckoning. Wesley stepped up to the podium. His face wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either. We don't just enforce the law, he began. We represent it. He raised a hand. 2 officers appeared, escorting Shane and Cody into the room. Not in cuffs, not humiliated, but under the full weight of 100 stares. Wesley's voice rang clear. After thorough review, I, Wesley Trenton, Chief of Police of Harbor Glen, hereby terminate the employment of Shane Kershaw and Cody Lannister, effective immediately, for professional misconduct, abuse of authority, in violation of public trust. No applause, but the atmosphere shifted undeniably. Some officers exchanged glances that said, "Finally." A few older patrolmen gave slight nods. They'd been belittled by Shane during late-night patrols for years. Wesley closed the file in front of him, looked around the room. "I didn't come back for revenge. I came to rebuild something that had rotted from the inside. And if any of you think you can walk over the people we swore to serve and not be held accountable, those two," he nodded toward the rear, "are your answer." No one clapped. But in that silence, there was the sound of trust exhaling back into the room. 3 days later, after the disciplinary meeting, the names Shane Kershaw and Cody Lannister were everywhere. The front page of the Harbor Gazette ran the headline in bold Monday morning. 2 former officers fired for abuse of power. Chief Trenton acts decisively. That night, on Channel 8, Civic Watch News, a newscaster read with conviction as slow-motion footage showed the 2 men walking out of the precinct with cardboard boxes in hand. After years without disciplinary action, they finally pay the price for disregarding civil rights and the honor of the badge. This wasn't just a firing. It was a public verdict. In a cramped 1-bedroom apartment off Pine Grove Avenue, Shane Kershaw sat motionless in front of the TV. The flickering blue glow of the breaking news segment danced across his face. Drawn, unshaven, hollow, a far cry from the cold, cocksure officer he once was behind the wheel of the cruiser. His phone rang. He glanced at the screen. It was the private security company he'd applied to the day before. He didn't answer. He knew what they'd say before they even spoke. "We regret to inform you, we've chosen another candidate more suitable for the position." Wherever he went, the name Shane Kershaw was now paired with one keyword online: abuse of power. As for Cody Lannister, 29 years old, he hadn't stepped outside since the day he was fired. In his 3rd-floor apartment at Hawthorne Crossing, the curtains stayed drawn. Empty beer cans lay scattered at the base of his sofa. On his laptop, an unfinished job application flickered on screen. Social media was relentless. On the Harbor Glen Community Forum, one resident wrote, "Cody once told me I look suspicious just for walking at 9 p.m. Watching him jobless today feels like justice in motion. No sympathy. No defenders." One night, Cody played the video of the disciplinary meeting, the moment Wesley Trenton fired him in front of the entire department. When he saw the disgust in his former colleague's eyes, he broke down in tears, not from remorse, but because, for the first time, he felt truly seen for what he was. At a small cafe at the end of the block, 2 middle-aged men exchanged low voices over coffee. "You hear the news? Those 2 cops who used to pull people for no reason finally got canned. Things are different under Trenton. Finally got someone cleaning house." An older woman at the next table nodded slowly. He didn't just fire them. He set the standard. Somewhere across the city, trust was returning, not with speeches, but with action. But in the colder corners of town, in dim apartments and hollow silence, Shane and Cody were learning a lesson they once mocked. A smirk can ruin a life. And this time, no one was laughing with them. With Shane Kershaw and Cody Lannister officially removed from the force, Wesley Trenton knew this was only the beginning. Firing a few corrupt officers wouldn't heal a department starved of public trust. To restore the honor of the Harbor Glen Police Division, he'd have to do more than punish. He had to rebuild. He started with the most basic thing of all: professional conscience. A new program was launched: Ethical Policing Task Force. Not just quick seminars or checkbox training, but full-scale workshops, scenario-based learning, guest speakers from the State Bureau of Civil Ethics, civil rights experts, and even residents who had suffered injustice firsthand. One such speaker was Maya Colson, a black woman who had once been pulled over by Shane for nothing more than driving a new sedan in a wealthy neighborhood. Now, she stood before a room full of recruits. "I'm not afraid of the law," she said. "I'm afraid of the eyes behind the gun, the ones that think I'm guilty, before I've said a single word." At first, not everyone supported the initiative. Some veteran officers whispered, just another PR stunt. But after the first session, when Maya shared the moment she was pulled over for simply being black, the room fell silent. No interruptions, no jokes, even the skeptical head shakes began to fade. Wesley also established an independent oversight committee, a panel made up of community members, attorneys, and local journalists. Every time an internal complaint surfaced, the committee held the power to access records, request data polls, and demand that investigative outcomes be made public. But the biggest shift in the department didn't come from new regulations. It came from how Wesley listened. He didn't stay holed up in his third-floor office. He visited every patrol team. He ate lunch with retired officers. And he asked the kind of questions few leaders ever asked. If you were me, what's the first thing you fix? Has anyone on this team ever made you lose trust? Is there anything you've done on duty that you regret? Change didn't happen overnight, but it was steady. It was real. Shift reports became more detailed. Citizens started to see officers greet them first, instead of asking, "What are you doing here?" And the veterans, the ones who used to stay silent to avoid conflict, were now the first to stand and say, "I've made mistakes. Now I want to teach the rookies so they don't repeat them." Wesley understood. Real reform doesn't come from slogans. It comes from lessons a whole department has to relearn. Together, that spring, Harbor Glen bloomed earlier than usual. Even in neighborhoods that once watched every patrol car with suspicion, residents began nodding back at the young officers in uniform, not because they forgot what had happened, but because they'd started to believe the change might be real. At a town hall held inside headquarters, Wesley Trenton was invited to speak to the newest class of recruits. He stepped onto the stage in a simple uniform. No fancy backdrop, no dramatic lighting, just quiet focus. From young people learning what it meant to wear a badge with honor, Wesley didn't deliver a speech. He told a story about a man who once stood outside the force he loved because he couldn't protect his sister from injustice within it, and how one day he came back, not to punish, but to repair. "I used to think," Wesley said, his voice slow and deep, "that the badge was power, that if you wore it, people would listen. But that's not true. The badge doesn't earn respect. How you treat people does." A young recruit raised his hand. "Sir, did you ever think you'd fail?" Wesley smiled. "Yes, hundreds of times. But I believe if we stop acting because we're afraid to fail, then we never truly stand for anything at all." The room fell silent. He stood, holding his badge in his hand, raising it for all to see. "This isn't a piece of metal. It's a promise. To the public, to your team, and to your own conscience." Then he walked into the hallway, where the late afternoon light streamed through long glass windows. Danica Trenton was waiting. She smiled and gave a quiet wave. They didn't need to speak, because everything they had once dreamed of was finally becoming real. In Wesley's heart, he knew the old wounds don't heal easily, but every right decision, every young officer guided with integrity, was one more patch on a system once torn wide open. And if someone were to ask, "What does the badge stand for?" Wesley Trenton wouldn't say power. He would say, "It stands for trust." He would say, "It's trust. And if we lose that, we have nothing left." I hope today's story reminded you, a true leader doesn't chase power. They pursue what's right, with courage, kindness, and action when it matters most. If this story meant something to you, please share it with someone who might need to believe in justice again. And don't forget to subscribe, so you won't miss the next story. It just might be the one you've been needing to hear. In the meantime, I've handpicked 2 special videos just for you, wishing you a peaceful, hopeful day ahead.